Dr. Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And it's my pleasure to take a call on this bill and discuss the Land Transport Amendment Bill, a piece of legislation which many others before me have talked about. The purpose of this bill being to lower the adult legal alcohol limits from 400 micrograms of alcohol per litre of breath to 250 micrograms and from 80 milligrams of alcohol per 100 millilitres of blood to 50 milligrams. And the civil infringements of $200 fines and 50 demerit points that will be imposed on those who fall between the 50 and 80 milligram levels. I think that it's important that we as a House can come to consensus and collective agreement around how it is that we as a society deal with those who choose to get behind the wheel of a car after they have been drinking to a level that makes them a danger to others, who not only themselves but to others who use the road. I think that it's really important that we don't see this issue become highly politicised and that we can come to agreement. So it is a pleasure to be a part of a debate where parties are signalling their support for this bill to go to Select Committee, to hear the submissions and to finally do something about lowering the number of deaths on our roads caused by alcohol even further. As many speakers before me have outlined, this is a piece of legislation that has a long history. It's been a long time in the making. It's been brewing about for a while. And my colleagues Ian Lees-Galloway and Darian Fenton pointed to Darren Hughes and his members' bill that he brought to this House in 2009. And it is an interesting history of this piece of legislation that we're standing here debating today, because I think the idea that we are debating about whether or not we are going to make a change as legislators in this country that will mean fewer deaths of New Zealanders is really important. That we have the power with decisions we make in this House to mean that fewer New Zealanders will needlessly die on our roads. And I think that is the important stuff that many of us to this House. Between 2006 and 2008, 30 people were killed in accidents where drivers were known to have a blood alcohol content of between 0.05 and 0.08. We can treat this as a dry statistic of 30 people, or we can think about the 30 human beings, the families of the 30 human beings, their friends, and all their networks who were needlessly mourning the loss of a loved one. This is really important stuff, and it's important that we crack on with it, because as others have noticed, it has been a long time coming. I think that it is really important that we go back and revise blood alcohol limits that were set in 1978. Now, I remember growing up in the 1970s and 80s in New Zealand and there being an entirely different attitude to drinking and driving in this country. That the concern of many of the adults around me seemed to be whether or not they were going to be caught, not whether or not they posed a danger to themselves or to others who were using the roads. As a student in the 1990s, being a part of the SAD movement, the Students Against Drunk Driving, where we signed contracts with our parents that there was a two-way contractual agreement that a parent or a new driver, teenage driver, would come and pick family members up if they had consumed too much alcohol. We've seen much societal change that has led to fewer deaths on our road, but we do need to revisit, it is my belief that we need to revisit blood alcohol limits that were concocted in the 1970s when we did have an entirely different attitude to drink driving. So in July 2010, Cabinet did make some decisions around what was going to happen with drink driving. As many speakers have alluded to, there was a lowering of the youth drink drive limit for drivers under 20 years of age from a blood alcohol content, and that was lowered. And I think that the evidence did point to the fact that many of the deaths and injuries and on our roads do happen amongst the lower cohort of people. But there was a perplexing decision to maintain the current adult drink drive limit at its 1978 level of 0.8 while we went and did some more research. And I think that the then Minister had an attitude that is somewhat perplexing to me, that he, in this House, in response to a question from Darren Hughes, the Minister Stephen Joyce, the then Minister of Transport, said, before lowering the adult blood alcohol limit, the government would want to ensure that specific impact on the road toll of drivers with a blood alcohol concentration between 0.05 grams and 0.08 grams was known, and that the move had very broad support amongst the driving population of this country. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm all for consultation, but I think when it comes to making decisions about where we need to set a safe limit for the amount of alcohol that people are allowed to drink before they get behind the wheel of a car, I think we need to rely on the science and the evidence, and perhaps not how people feel. That we already had very well-established international evidence. We had well-established New Zealand evidence. We could have made this decision back there in 2010. New Zealand lagged behind the rest of the world, and I don't know if Stephen Joyce really did believe that there was something inherently different about New Zealanders and their physical makeup that meant that their level of blood alcohol should be substantially different from those in Australia or those in other places that had made moves to lower the blood alcohol limit. And it is somewhat perplexing, Mr. Speaker, that this is a government that has run roughshod over the will of New Zealand over their 5 years in government, but on this, the level of blood alcohol, they choose to go out and see how people feel. It just doesn't make sense to me. And at the time in 2010, we on this side of the House, the Labour opposition, offered cross-party support because we don't believe that this is an issue that should become a political football, that this is an important health issue for New Zealand, an important issue where we can literally save the lives of New Zealanders each year. And we offered up that support. We also pointed to what international experts were saying about the New Zealand government's, about Cabinet's decision not to proceed with the lowering of the blood alcohol limit. The UK drug and alcohol expert, Professor David Nutt, described National's reluctance to make a decision on this as weak and making no sense. This was how the international expert community felt about how our government was dealing with a really important issue. We didn't need to go back and do more research, Mr. Speaker. We had research coming out of our ears. The Law Commission's report on alcohol left no doubt that blood alcohol limits needed to be lowered. There just simply wasn't a need to go back. But that they did. The government decided to go back, and now we have a report that shows that indeed, if we had done this, we could have literally saved lives. So, Mr. Speaker, I say that it's not before time that we see this legislation come. It's a pity that we're not heading into the Christmas season of 2013, a period of time that is notorious for road accidents and for drink driving, where we have these lowered levels, and we could literally be saving lives. But, Mr. Speaker, I won't be churlish. It is good to see it going to Select Committee, and the public do now have a chance to make their views heard. Other members of this House have raised areas where people might want to have a say. They might want to raise questions about whether this is the right limit, as has been alluded to by earlier speakers, they might want to raise questions in their submissions about whether or not the sanctions that this legislation are imposing are appropriate and whether they are the right sanctions. But whatever way, Mr Speaker, I am very pleased to see this bill progressing through the House, and I really do urge people to have their voices heard at the Select Committee process and make it clear to this government, to give this government a clear message. The time is right now. We cannot delay any further, and we need to get on with this. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Dr. Cam Calder.
Mr Speaker, this bill will